If you have peripheral neuropathy, there's a very specific moment in your day that most people talk about. It's not the morning, it's not the afternoon. It's when you finally sit down at night, when the house gets quiet, when you climb into bed. That's when the burning starts. Or the tingling begins to get louder, or that buzzing electrical feeling in your feet that you managed to push through all day. Suddenly, it's all you can think about. And the thought that runs through your head is, why is this worse right now? I was fine 3 hours ago. Why is this happening to my body at night that's not happening during the day? That question is exactly what I want to answer today. And I want to be clear from the start. This is not a surface level answer. I'm not going to tell you, elevate your feet and take some magnesium. We're going to go through what is actually happening layer by layer because most people with neuropathy have never had it explained to them in this way. I run 360 Physical Medicine, and neuropathy is a primary condition that we treat in our clinic. I've worked with hundreds of neuropathy patients, and this question, why is it worse at night, comes up in almost every consultation. So let's dive into it. The first thing I need to correct is the assumption most patients come in with. And that assumption is, my neuropathy is worse at night because my nerves got worse overnight. And I understand why people think that. It makes intuitive sense. The symptoms are louder, so the damage must be severe, right? Not exactly. Here's what I need you to understand. Nerve damage does not spike at 9 p.m. and then recover by morning. Your nerves don't know what time it is, not in the way most people would imagine. Now, pain processing does follow circadian biology, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But the damage itself does not spike at 9 p.m. What's changing at night is not the degree of damage. What's changing is your ability to detect it and your body's ability to suppress it. There's a difference between the signal getting louder and the noise around it getting quieter. During the day, your nervous system is processing an enormous amount of information. Movement, sound, temperature, conversation, task, stress, visual input. Your brain is constantly filtering and prioritizing what deserves your attention. At night, most of that competition goes away. And the nerve signal that were there all along, they're now at the front of the line. So before you panic and think you're deteriorating overnight, understand for many patients, this is not the case. What you're experiencing is a shift in perception, not always a shift in damage. Now, I said not always deliberately because there are real biological changes that happen at night that do amplify nerve symptoms, and we're going to cover all of them. But the first step is separating what's real from what's interpretation. Let me describe what happens neurologically when you get quiet. You've been in a noisy restaurant and had a full conversation without being distracted. But the second the restaurant goes quiet, you hear every clink of silverware. The silverware was always there. Your brain just stopped filtering it out. Neuropathy works in a very similar way. During the day, your brain is fielding thousands of sensory inputs, and pain signals from your feet and legs are competing with everything else. The conversation you're in, the task in front of you, movement itself, walking or shifting your weight side to side generates its own input that partially masks what's happening in the nerve. When you lie down and go still, all that competition disappears. Now, I want to be very direct about something. This does not mean that it's in your head. I want to say that again because some patients have been told a version of that, and it's not helpful or even accurate. The nerve damage is real. The signals are real. The burning is real. The tingling is real. What I'm describing is a mechanism of perception, not a question of whether your symptoms are legitimate, because they are. What we're trying to do is understand why the timing happens the way that it does. Because if you understand the mechanism, you stop spending energy being scared by it, and you can start addressing the right things. There's also a secondary layer to this. When you're trying to sleep and the burning starts, your brain registers that as a threat. Your stress response activates, and stress amplifies pain perception. So now you have a loop. Symptoms trigger stress, stress amplifies symptoms, symptoms get worse, more stress. Now, this is not a character flaw. This is a neurological feedback loop. And it's one of the reasons why nighttime neuropathy is so exhausting. Not just painful, but genuinely exhausting. Now let's go deeper, because there are actual biological reasons beyond perception why processing changes at night. Your body runs on a circadian rhythm. Most people know that in the context of sleep and wake cycles. But what most people don't realize is that your nervous system also runs on a circadian rhythm. Pain sensitivity, the actual threshold at which your nervous system registers something as painful, it fluctuates throughout the day. In the morning and through the midday, most people have a higher pain threshold. In the evening and overnight, that threshold drops. Your nervous system becomes more sensitized. Now, this is measurable and it's well documented. And in a nervous system that is already compromised, in a nerve environment that is already struggling, this drop in threshold can mean the difference between a manageable evening and a miserable one. There's also something called central sensitization. In chronic neuropathy, the brain and spinal cord begin to process pain signals differently over time. The nervous system recalibrates around the injury. Pain signals that would normally be filtered or dampened get amplified instead. The volume goes up, not because more damage is occurring, but because the processing system itself has changed. And this recalibration is not uniform throughout the entire day. At night, when the brain is transitioning towards sleep, the descending pain modulation system becomes less active. And I want to explain what that actually means. Your brain has pathways that run downward through the spinal cord. Their job is to suppress incoming pain signals. Think of them as your body's internal volume control. During the day, with full cortical activity and engagement, those pathways are more active. They're doing their job, dampening the signal, keeping things manageable. At night, as the brain begins to shift into sleep mode, that downward suppression begins to get weaker. The volume control stops working as well. And in a nervous system that is already sensitized, already recalibrated toward amplification, that drop in suppression is felt almost immediately. Translation: your body's natural pain dampening mechanism is least effective exactly when you need sleep the most. On top of this, sleep deprivation itself, which most neuropathy patients deal with, creates a compounding problem. So here's the cycle. Neuropathy makes it hard to sleep. Poor sleep lowers your pain threshold. A lower pain threshold makes the neuropathy feel worse the next night, which makes sleep even harder to get. Now, I've watched this cycle break people down over months and even years, not just physically, their mood, their relationships, their willingness to do anything changes. When someone comes into my office and says they haven't slept more than 4 hours in months, that's not just a sleep problem. That's a pain amplification problem. Sleep deprivation is actively making their nerve symptoms worse, and the nerve symptoms are actively preventing sleep that they need to recover. So understanding this cycle is critical, because chasing the symptom at 11 p.m., reaching for another medication, another supplement, it doesn't address the loop. You have to address the nerve environment that's creating the sensitivity in the first place. Now, this section here is important, and I want to be direct about it. For diabetic and pre-diabetic patients, which is a significant portion of the people that deal with peripheral neuropathy, what happens metabolically in the evening directly affects how your nerves feel at night. Now, here's what I see clinically. Many patients eat their largest meal at the end of the day. Blood sugar rises, insulin responds, and depending on what you ate and how much and what the metabolic baseline is, blood sugar can swing significantly after that evening meal. Elevated blood sugar creates what we call metabolic volatility in the nerve environment. Chronically elevated glucose can injure peripheral nerves and small vessels that support them. The myelin that coats the nerve fiber takes on that damage, and the tiny capillaries that deliver oxygen to the nerves in your feet and legs, they become compromised. So when blood sugar spikes in the evening and then drops overnight, you get a metabolic whiplash effect. And nerve tissue is extraordinarily sensitive to that kind of instability, even in patients who are not completely diabetic but have blood sugar dysregulation, elevated fasting glucose, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. This process plays out the exact same way. There's also the issue of late night eating habits. Now, a lot of people with neuropathy are sedentary in the evening. They're just not moving. Circulation to lower extremities is already reduced, and now you add a metabolic load on top of that, and you're creating a particularly hostile environment for an already compromised nerve tissue. Now, I'm not saying this to generate anxiety around food. I'm saying it because it's actionable. Evening eating patterns, blood sugar stability, and metabolic health are real levers, and they're things that we look at specifically when we're evaluating a patient's nerve environment. There's also a straightforward mechanical layer here that doesn't get enough attention. When you lie down, several things change physically. First, circulation changes. During the day, gravity assists venous return from your legs back up to the heart. When you lie flat, that dynamic shifts. For some patients, particularly those with any vascular component to their neuropathy, this potential change affects blood flow to the already compromised nerve tissue in the lower extremities. Second is pressure. When you're lying still, there's a sustained pressure on specific areas: the heels, the sides of the feet, and the ankles. In a person with healthy nerve function, that pressure is processed normally. In someone with peripheral neuropathy, where the sensory signal processing is already dysregulated, sustained pressure can trigger or amplify that burning and tingling sensation significantly. This is why a lot of patients tell me that they can't stand the weight of the sheets on their feet. The sheets aren't heavy, but the nerve tissue is interpreting that light contact as something much more intense. Now, this is called allodynia, pain from a stimulus that shouldn't be painful, and it's extremely common in people with peripheral neuropathy. And the third one is entrapment. Certain positions during sleep compress nerves: the peroneal nerve at the knee, the tibial nerve at the ankle. If you sleep in a particular position for hours at a time and there's any susceptibility in those areas, that sustained compression can add a mechanical component to the nighttime symptom picture. This is why some patients find that certain sleeping positions, a pillow under their knees, or a different mattress firmness, or even a foot cradle that lifts the sheets, actually makes a real difference. Now, it doesn't fix the underlying problem, but it removes one of the mechanical triggers that's making nighttime worse than it has to be. Now, I want to talk about something that I see play out over and over again. A patient has a terrible night, burning, tingling, and they just can't sleep. So they go looking for solutions to the nighttime problem. They find a supplement that claims to reduce neuropathy pain at night, or they get a prescription for a sleep medication, or they try a topical cream right before bed. Now, sometimes those things provide partial temporary relief, and sometimes they don't even work at all. But here's the consistent pattern that I notice. None of those approaches are addressing what created the problem during the day. The nighttime symptoms are not the origin of the problem. They are the expression of what's been building for hours, for days, and sometimes even years. The metabolic volatility that's disrupting the nerve environment. That doesn't start at 9 p.m. It's been building since the morning. The central sensitization, the sleep deprivation, the circulation deficit, the inflammatory load, all of that is accumulating throughout your day. And then nighttime comes and the competing signals drop away, and the result is that your neuropathy is all that you can feel. Chasing the symptom at 11 p.m. is the equivalent of waiting for your check engine light that has been on for a week to show up and then just covering it with a piece of tape. The problem isn't the light. The problem is what the light is telling you about what's happening underneath. Gabapentin, Lyrica, topical agents, those medications may help reduce symptom intensity for some people, but they were never designed to rebuild the nerve environment. They reduce how loudly the signal fires, but they do not change the nerve environment that is generating that signal. And as long as a nerve environment stays hostile, inadequate circulation, metabolic volatility, poor sleep, systemic inflammation, the signal will keep coming. You can modulate it for a while, but you can't outrun it indefinitely. So let me bring this together, because there's a bigger idea underneath everything I've said today. When your neuropathy is worse at night, that's not random. It's not bad luck. It's information. It's your nervous system telling you something about the environment it's operating in. The nighttime amplification, the reduction in competing signals, the drop in pain threshold, the metabolic fluctuation, the positional factors, the sleep deprivation loop, all of it is pointing back to the same core issue. The nerve environment is compromised, and a compromised nerve environment doesn't just produce symptoms at night. It produces a nervous system that struggles to recover, struggles to repair, and struggles to regenerate because the conditions required for those processes are missing. When I work with a patient, the nighttime symptom pattern is one of the most useful pieces of clinical information that I have, because it tells me how the nerve environment is functioning or not functioning across a full 24-hour cycle. A patient who only burns at night after eating heavily tells me something different than a patient who burns all night regardless of diet. A patient whose symptoms shift based on sleep position tells me something different than a patient whose symptoms are identical regardless of how they sleep. Every variation in the pattern is a signal, and reading those signals accurately is what separates a systematic approach to neuropathy from a symptom-chasing approach. The question isn't just how do I get through tonight? The question is what is my nerve environment doing, and what does it need to actually change? Nighttime neuropathy is not random. It's a report card from the nerve environment. And once you learn how to read it, you stop chasing the night and start changing the system. Now, if you found this useful, subscribe to the channel. Every video in this series is built around one central idea. Neuropathy is not a life sentence, but it requires understanding the biology, not just managing the symptoms. Now, I'll see you on the next one.